This is EF Outbound, a podcast that showcases transformative travel stories that defy our expectations, challenge our assumptions, and teach us something new about the world and ourselves. I'm Meg Martineau, and I'll be your host for this episode. This summer, the EF Outbound team got to interview the ultimate traveler.
My name is Anthony Bourdain. I'm a traveler, I'm a frequent flyer, I'm a storyteller, and an enthusiast.
If you don't know who Anthony Bourdain is, a quick Google search will suffice. He's written books like Kitchen Confidential and A Cook's Tour. He's had shows on the Food Network, the Travel Channel, and his most recent show, Parts Unknown, has been on CNN since 2013. And while he's made the world his home, you might be surprised to learn that up until his 40s, Anthony didn't really travel. It's not that he didn't want to, he just didn't have the opportunity to. But starting at a young age, Anthony's curiosity and wild mind took him to faraway places.
I grew up in a house of music and books. My parents had a good book collection. And a love of some really great children's books that my father would read me. Bedtime stories, and then I soon, dissatisfied with the relative short amount of time. I want to know what's happening next. This Wind in the Willows action, or Dr. Dolittle. I want to read the next chapter. I'm not waiting around till tomorrow night, so I'd read it. And then, of course, there were, all these grown-up books downstairs. I started getting into those because, things are a little more interesting down there. Films were very important to me. Very important to me. My father worked in a camera store and would rent 16mm prints of classic films and show them to, family and friends.
What the fellow said.
So my view of what the world should be and could be as a little boy was already, pirate ships and Tarzan and adventures in faraway, exotic places.
But as he got older, those pirate ships sailed off into the distance, and with them, his dreams of adventures around the world.
I found myself working in a very insular world for most of my adult life. I was in one kitchen or another in New York City. I didn't see any of it. So by the time I got this unexpected opportunity to travel as much as I liked, anywhere I liked, I was pretty happy about that. I was ready to take full advantage. I thought it was game over, and suddenly it was bonus round.
So when we sat down with Anthony in a beautiful villa in Italy, he told us about his first trip out of the country for his book and TV show, A Cook's Tour. For Anthony, this trip was a first in many, many ways, and it held a lot of meaning. He was going to the country he had wanted to visit the most, one he had been dreaming about for years. Today on EF Outbound, Anthony will tell us how Vietnam shattered his expectations, stole his heart, and returned him home, completely changed.
In the case of Vietnam, it was a first love in a lot of ways. I grew up during the Vietnam War era. I've read deeply into both the nonfiction and fiction about the place. It was a place about which I had very high, very maybe foolishly romantic notions, and it ended up being even better than I thought it would be, that experience. Back then I went to Saigon, Canton, Nha Trang, and Hanoi. A lot of travel. Oh, and up into the tribal areas in the north. God, looking back on it now, my thread count has improved somewhat since those days, let's put it that way. I do not believe in love at first sight. I think you could make a case for love at first smell. And the smells of Vietnam, it's unlike anything I'd ever smelled before. Fish sauce, and a sort of fermented, funky fish sauce, which I happen to love. Durian, which is a slightly rotten smell. Diesel fuel from the scooters. Joss sticks burning incense from the temples. Jasmine. It's quite beautiful. Graham Greene writes about it, how the smell grabs you. And it does.
Graham Greene writes, I can't say what made me fall in love with Vietnam. That a woman's voice can drug you, that everything is so intense. The colors, the taste, even the rain. Nothing like that filthy rain in London. They say whatever you're looking for, you will find here. They say you come to Vietnam and understand a lot in a few minutes, but the rest has got to be lived. The smell. That's the first thing that hits you, promising everything in exchange for your soul. And the heat. Your shirt is straight away a rag. You can hardly remember your name or what you came to escape from. But at night there's a breeze. The river is so beautiful. You could be forgiven for thinking there was no war, that the gunshots were fireworks, that only pleasure matters. And then something happens as you knew it would, and nothing can ever be the same again.
I fell in love with the country. I became bewitched by the difference. It's an extraordinarily diverse place. I mean, there are beach areas, jungle, mountains. You know, there are alpine areas of Vietnam that look like Switzerland. I was overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity of the people and the cuisine, how regional it was, how proud people were of their food. You know, you'd go to Canton and they'd say, oh, where did you just come from? And you'd say, I just came from Saigon. And they'd say, oh, their food is terrible. You're lucky to be in Canton. The food is the best in Vietnam here. Go to Nha Trang. Where did you come from? Well, I just came from Canton. Oh, their food is terrible. You're so lucky to be in Nha Trang. We have the best food in all of Vietnam.
And while all of Vietnam was capturing his heart, Anthony had a specific encounter that really started to shift his perceptions of the world outside of America. He was going up the Mekong Delta to visit a rice farmer who would cook him duck in a traditional manner. He didn't know what to expect, and he started his morning pretty regularly, with a cup of coffee.
You know, well, there's that great coffee in Vietnam is a true joy. They have those little metal, little tin cups. They put the coffee grounds, a little drip on top. It takes forever to pass through, and you add sweetened condensed milk to it. It's very thick and almost chocolatey. Also great over ice, just fantastic. Some of the most delicious coffee on earth. So I'm sure I started off with coffee, then board a long sampan-like boat, a little jury-rigged putt-putt engine on the back, long trip, probably about 45 minutes through interconnected canals up to the rice farmer's home. You see, kids playing in the water, rice farmers squatting as they can do for hours at a time, looking at you with, incredible curiosity. Livestock, laundry, homes of the very poor, especially in the morning, the sounds of a farming community in Southeast Asia. So first the rooster crows, then you hear people starting to cough, clear their lungs. You hear people washing themselves, gathering water, going through this morning routine, starting up cooking fires. I'm a city boy. I grew up in the suburbs, right next to New York City. I've lived in New York City since I'm 17. For me, it's almost shocking to not wake up to car horns and garbage trucks and the beep, beep, beep of trucks parking. So to wake up to, at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, to the roosters, then people shuffling off to the outhouse. It's very different.
When he arrived, Anthony quickly learned something about his host.
Him and his friends were, as was pretty much required at the time, which were slightly more repressive, all former Viet Cong cadre. People were introduced to me as patriots and heroes. This man is a great patriot. This man is a great hero, during the American War, what they call the American War. These areas had been hit hard. They had no doubt experienced every variety of casualty, horror, loss of family, torture, detention, all of the stuff that comes with an unconventional war.
Anthony, admittedly so, had some preconceived notions on how they would feel about the 6'4" Americans standing in front of them now.
I thought they'd be angry. I thought there would be some lingering resentment, some hesitation. And I asked about this one old guy who seemed to take particular pleasure in making me keep up with him shot for shot. He must have been pushing 90, sitting there in black pajamas across from me, missing most of his teeth. And I asked my translator, I said, please ask the older gentleman, does he feel any lingering resentment at all for all the years of conflict between our countries? The guy laughed. And he said, look, don't flatter yourselves. We've been fighting a long time, Before you, it was the French. Before them, it was the Japanese. Before them, it was the Chinese many times. After you, it was the Cambodians, the Chinese. You were nothing special. During that time, you were our enemy. Now, eat, drink, have fun. Nothing personal. And he meant it. This is an attitude I'm unfamiliar with. In the West, we tend to linger over such over memories like that. Maybe they don't have the luxury of it. Maybe they're farmer warriors. They prefer to, for centuries they've been, farming rice, and when necessary, transition very smoothly and quickly to a very ferocious infantry. But they took great pride in being good hosts. This was very important to them. They were kind, and they did everything they could to show me a good time and make sure that I was happy.
This put Anthony at ease, so he put his prior thoughts aside and sat down to enjoy the meal, which turned out was something unexpected as well.
This particular duck, they wrung its neck, covered it with clay from the rice paddy, and then built a big fire of rice husks. And the duck was supposed to bake inside the clay. A few minutes into this process, out of the burning flame, the duck is suddenly revived and comes flopping in flames out of the fire. It was, the sort of scene that Food Network had never shown before. Let's put it that way. God, it was, look, that's not fun.
Eventually, they got the duck back in the fire, and then finally, it was time to eat.
Everyone gathers around, first thing they do, crack open a head, suck out the brain. Look, it was not the best duck in the world. Let's put it that way.
Oh my gosh, but you made it seem like it was. Like in the show, you're like, this is amazing.
Well, one has to be kind to, grateful to one's host. The rest of the meal was really good. We ate some very simple food and a whole hell of a lot of rice whiskey, homemade rice brewed whiskey. There's no elegant way to put it. We got hammered, all of us, together. And here they were singing as it got darker and darker. And we were something of a curiosity in the area. The old man had seen Americans before, up close. More than likely he'd killed a few. But the kids from the neighboring farms who started appearing out of the darkness and would come up and rub the hair on my arm incredulously, and poke me and giggle, and, run away and then come back and poke me again. I found myself as curious to those kids as perhaps they were to me. I had to be helped back into the boat. There's that, I think it's a Raymond Chandler line. I went to brush something off my cheek and it was the floor. I'm pretty good at recognizing when that time's coming, and I asked to be exfiltrated. But it was a long ride home, or a long float home. I don't fully recall all of it. It was very surreal. Back in those days, I would ridiculously and maybe even insultingly compare everything that I was experiencing to some scene from Apocalypse Now. But that ride down the river or the canals late at night with, lights flashing, it was very Dolung Bridge, at least in my head. You talk about transformative. I had to kind of rethink a lot of things. It was the first time I sat down with perfectly nice people who were being wonderful to me, who at another time would have cheerfully killed me. To have former enemies singing songs, patting me on the leg, making sure that I was having a good time. And they really wanted me to have a good time. That feeling of going someplace and experiencing something that I, never had before, but also could never have expected. That feeling of surprise, of being disarmed, of having the things you think you know turn completely upside down. I learned to crave that.
And part of that unexpectedness and feeling of being disarmed had to do with something he'd never thought to question before.
I'd been a chef for 30 years before I saw my first animal actually die for food on my show. It is not a pleasurable or a comfortable experience, but I think people should know what's involved. There is a shame and guilt that comes with it that is useful. I've been ordering up death over the phone for years, but Don Corleone style, I would make a suggestion that maybe I would like some steak, and somewhere down the line, somebody killed a steer and did the dirty work. I got the meat in the box, and that's the way meat had appeared on my customers' tables. I came back from those first trips seeing how hard people struggle to put food on their table, but also seeing what's involved with the animals. I am much less likely to waste food now, let's put it that way. If I'm gonna cook pig, I'm gonna cook it as well as I possibly can, and I'm gonna use every little bit. It seems obscene. Something struggled and died for this dinner. I'm not gonna throw half of it in the garbage.
The next morning, a slightly groggy Anthony discovered another love in the country that was so rapidly shifting his perspectives.
Once I spent time in Vietnam and got used to spicy noodle soup for breakfast and eating noodles for breakfast, that ruined American breakfast for me forever. I could really never go back to eggs and toast or home fries, all of that. I mean, it just ain't right. If I do eat an American breakfast, I need a nap afterwards. It's so much. But to wake up, go out, have maybe a cup of Vietnamese coffee, sit there on a low plastic stool out in the street, order a bowl of spicy noodles or bun hoc or bun bo hue, slurp away and watch Vietnamese street traffic, women in their eyes going by, with whole families, 4 or 5, crammed on one motorbike, seeing how the neighborhood works and lives and eats. I mean, it's a fantastic little movie going on in front of you as you eat your noodles, and that is a good way to live. That was life-changing for me. I mean, for me, still, perfect happiness in a meal is sitting down on one of those little low plastic stools and ordering a bowl of noodles.
Vietnam had officially stolen his heart. After that, he went to Cambodia.
And flew home from there, a very different person than the one who first showed up knowing nothing about making television and nothing about anything.
And beyond the new outlook on acceptance, hospitality, and breakfast, Anthony had been truly affected. I
felt both enriched and distanced from my former life. I had a very hard time relating to some people who I'd been very close to before. I had a hard time figuring out not how I was going to tell these stories in a book or on TV. That was relatively easy. But how I would tell these stories to my friends and to my then wife, that was difficult. That still is. When you've been treated generously by strangers, when you've smelled things and tasted things and seen things that none of your friends have seen, that few where you come from have seen, that are unlike anything you've seen before. Look, that changes you, mostly in really good ways. But I think you also have to be prepared for the possibility that it will alienate you somewhat from the life you once had. You know, you're riding a scooter through a rice paddy. There's a color of green during the season. The rice paddies, it's almost electric. You're smelling Vietnam. It gets darker. You look up and there's just a perfect moon hanging there in the sky over the rice paddy. You think, that moon is for me. I'm here. It's up to me to experience it as much as I can and keep it in a very private part of my heart and my soul, because you can't in words or in images really reproduce that, and maybe you shouldn't. Meaning, you go back and tell your friends, all my friends are cooks and chefs. Am I doing them a favor by going back and saying, oh, I just had this most awesome time in Vietnam. I had a little rice whiskey, and I'm out there in the rice paddies, and I saw just this incredible swollen red moon rise slowly over the tree line. And it was awesome beyond. Are they going to be grateful for this? You know, that's what I did last week. What did you do? Well, the plumbing broke down. It's like, some experiences are unshareable. It changed my relationships with a lot of people, having seen what I saw. You figure out right away, as one does with friends and people close to you, you start thinking, well, if I go back to Vietnam, could I go with this person? And you realize, no. They would not make a good traveling companion. They would not get it. And if they don't get Vietnam, I don't know whether I can be friends with them anymore. That's a terrible thing to admit. Your perspective has shifted. You cannot look at your old life the same way when you know that things could be different. You know, I use, spicy noodles for breakfast as one example, but it's way beyond that. And as one continues to travel and see other things, many of them quite fantastic, It's Rutger Hauer and Blade Runner at the end talking about, seeing, starships crashing and together, in another galaxy. It feels like that sometimes. I mean, I've seen truly incredible things that, I can't even tell people about. I've clearly made a decision that I would rather experience those things than remain ignorant of them. It might well be more comfortable to stay at home and, but not for me.
And as for falling in love?
I don't know whether you ever grow tired of a country you love. I'll never be done with going back to Vietnam. There's always more to, not only to look at for the first time, but things to revisit to see how things have changed and are changing. And Vietnam is a place that's changing very, very quickly. I get off the plane and breathe deep, and I'm happy to be alive in Vietnam. It's an incredible place.
EF Outbound is brought to you by EF Education First, the world leader in international education. This episode was hosted and produced by Meg Martineau, with help from me, Shelby Elatmani. It was sound designed by Billy Raznick. And special thanks this week to the EF Tours video team for helping it all come together. For more information on the podcast, head over to ef.com/podcast. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to share your own transformative travel story, email us at outbound@ef.com.